I'm Natalie, 32 years old, squeezed between my nephew and niece at the Thanksgiving dinner table while my family raises their champagne flutes in celebration. Everyone receives heartfelt toasts except me. My older brother Marcus for his promotion to senior partner at his law firm, my younger sister Diana for her viral documentary that premiered at Sundance. Even my cousin's new kitten received an adorable mention. After years of being invisible despite all my sacrifices, I decided this would be my final family gathering. Just as I stood to leave, collecting whatever dignity remained like picking up scattered pearls, an unexpected knock echoed through the house. A stranger stood there holding a faded photograph and a sealed letter. Before I continue this story that changed everything, let me tell you what happened when this mysterious visitor turned my forgotten holiday into a revelation that would stun my entire family. Growing up as the middle child between two brilliant siblings was like living in the shadow of towering redwoods. My older brother Marcus displayed his legal prowess early, winning debate tournaments at 14 while I struggled to raise my hand in class. My younger sister Diana possessed natural charisma that made teachers and classmates gravitate toward her like she was magnetic north. And then there was me, steady, dependable Natalie. My parents, Robert and Catherine Harper, never intentionally overlooked me. At least that's what I told myself during countless sleepless nights. Dad, a successful corporate attorney, naturally connected with Marcus's argumentative brilliance. Mom, who'd set aside her own dreams of becoming a physician to raise us, lived vicariously through Diana's creative achievements. I inhabited the uncomfortable middle ground, neither intellectually dazzling nor artistically gifted enough to command their attention. School offered no escape from this pattern. Teachers who'd had Marcus would light up when they saw my last name on their roster. Another Harper. Are you as sharp as your brother? I wasn't. When Diana followed 3 years later, her creative reputation preceded her. Diana's sister. You must be so artistic. I wasn't that either. Despite earning a full scholarship to Stanford, I chose the local state university when Mom's cancer diagnosis terrified us all. Someone needed to stay close, I reasoned, watching my dreams of studying psychology at a prestigious program dissolve like sugar in bitter coffee. Neither Marcus nor Diana offered to alter their trajectories. Why would they? Their paths glittered with promise while mine seemed expendable. Marcus completed law school with honors, specializing in corporate litigation, a choice that made Dad beam with paternal pride. He married Victoria, a federal prosecutor with magazine cover looks and a family lineage that impressed even my status-conscious mother. Their children, Emma and Jake, excelled at everything from violin to tennis, continuing the Harper tradition of excellence that somehow bypassed my DNA. Diana's filmmaking career took her to international festivals and celebrity interviews. Her Instagram showcased red carpet premieres and meetings with famous directors. Each holiday she'd arrive with exotic gifts and stories that transformed our living room into a captivated audience hall. Her recent engagement to a British film producer only added to her mystique. Meanwhile, I built a quiet career as a social worker. I worked with foster children and troubled families that other agencies had written off, finding profound satisfaction in helping them navigate their trauma. Last month, one of my former clients, a teenage mother who'd aged out of the system, graduated from nursing school and thanked me in her speech. No one in my family attended despite my invitations. It's just so hard to get excited about your work when it's so ordinary, Mom once said, not maliciously but with genuine confusion. Marcus saves companies millions of dollars, Diana creates art that moves people, and you talk to people about their problems all day. I tried explaining the importance of intervention, how preventing a child's removal from their home matters as much as winning a corporate lawsuit. Dad nodded absently, already checking his phone for news alerts. The conversation shifted to Marcus's latest high-profile case before I finished my thought. Depression crept into my life like fog, so gradually I hardly noticed until I was completely enveloped. I started therapy last year. My therapist, Dr. Amanda Ross, was the first person who truly listened to my experiences without comparing them to my siblings' achievements. Your worth isn't measured relative to anyone else, she'd remind me, and family patterns are powerful, but not permanent. I clung to that hope while dreading each family gathering more intensely than the last. This Thanksgiving marked 12 years since I'd sacrificed my Stanford dreams to remain close to home. 12 years of showing up with homemade contributions no one commented on. 12 years of listening to Marcus and Diana receive praise for breathing while my promotions and achievements evaporated into conversational thin air. 3 weeks before this Thanksgiving, a nonprofit organization in Portland offered me their director of family services position. The salary would triple my income, the distance would quadruple my peace of mind. I decided this Thanksgiving would be my farewell performance in the role of invisible daughter. After dinner, I planned to announce my departure, though deep down I wondered if anyone would notice the empty chair next year. I arrived at my parents' Tudor-style house at exactly 2 p.m., balancing 2 homemade desserts and a bag of fresh dinner rolls. Through the kitchen window, I spotted Mom orchestrating the meal preparation like a conductor leading a symphony. Dad lounged in his leather chair, newspapers spread across his lap, pretending the holiday chaos wasn't unfolding around him. "You're here," Mom declared when I pushed through the door, though I'd arrived precisely when she'd requested. "Did you remember to bring the sweet potato casserole recipe I asked for?" I'd never been asked to bring any recipe, but I nodded anyway, sliding my desserts onto the crowded counter. "Just wanted to help however I could." "Well, help by finishing these vegetables," Mom replied, handing me a peeler without looking up. "Try not to make the carrots too uneven this time. Marcus mentioned last year that Jake doesn't like irregular pieces." By 3 o'clock, the house transformed into a reception hall for Marcus's arrival. Mom freshened her lipstick while Dad straightened his tie. I remained in the kitchen, chopping, stirring, and arranging, invisible labor for an invisible daughter. The doorbell's chime sent my parents rushing to the entrance. I wiped my hands and followed slowly, watching the performance from the hallway shadows. "There's my successful son," Dad boomed, clapping Marcus on the shoulder before kneeling to greet Emma and Jake with exaggerated enthusiasm. Marcus, tall and confident in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent, embraced our parents with practiced affection. Victoria followed, stunning in a simple outfit that somehow looked expensive. Her contribution to dinner passed to Mom like a sacred offering. "Let me look at you too," Mom cooed at her grandchildren. "Emma, you're more beautiful every time I see you." And Jake, so handsome and tall. "You must be the smartest boy in 4th grade." The children beamed under the attention shower, accepting kisses and compliments with the entitled ease of those who'd never known their worth questioned. "Aunt Natalie." Jake spotted me and waved enthusiastically, genuinely excited to see me. "Hey, kiddo," I replied, grateful for his uncomplicated affection. "Hi, Nat," Marcus acknowledged, his eyes already moving past me to the football game flickering on the television. "Your casserole looks amazing," I told Victoria, who rewarded me with a distracted smile. "Family recipe, 4th generation," she replied, already moving toward the kitchen to claim prime refrigerator space. By 4 o'clock, Diana's dramatic entrance completed our family tableau. She swept in with a cloud of expensive perfume, her arms laden with shopping bags from boutiques I'd only seen in magazines. "Sorry I'm late. The flight from LAX was delayed," she announced, though no one had mentioned her tardiness. "But wait until you see what I brought from the Cannes Film Festival." The living room instantly became Diana's stage, with scarves and festival memorabilia distributed like royal favors. Mom and Dad exclaimed over each item, asking questions that allowed Diana to elaborate on her adventures and important connections. "And for you, Natalie," she said eventually, handing me a small wrapped package almost as an afterthought. "Just a little something I picked up in France." Inside was a generic souvenir keychain, nothing like the handcrafted treasures everyone else received. I thanked her anyway, pocketing the trinket while she resumed her storytelling. When Mom announced dinner, the seating arrangement crystallized my position in the family hierarchy. Marcus and Victoria flanked Dad at one end of the table, with Diana beside Mom at the other. I found my name card sandwiched between Emma and Jake in the middle, far from any adult conversation. "Hope you don't mind sitting with the kids," Mom said, not waiting for my response. "We thought it would help keep them settled during the long meal." I nodded, swallowing the protest that formed instinctively. At 32, I was once again relegated to the children's table without actually having one. Throughout the elaborate meal, I attempted to join various conversations only to find myself repeatedly interrupted or spoken over. When I mentioned my recent promotion to senior case manager, Dad nodded vaguely before turning to Marcus. So, tell me more about this merger you're handling. Sounds like a complex case. I pushed turkey around my plate, becoming the invisible guardian of children's table manners rather than a participant in adult discussion. The wine flowed freely for everyone except me. Mom had forgotten to place a glass at my setting, assuming I'd be too busy with the children to drink. Aunt Natalie, can you help me cut my turkey? Emma asked, and I complied, finding strange comfort in being needed for something, even a task this small. As dessert approached, I retreated to the kitchen under the guise of helping, using the moment alone to collect myself. Through the serving window, I watched my family laughing together, unified in a way that never quite extended to include me. You've always been the helper, Mrs. Rodriguez, our longtime neighbor, observed, startling me as she entered with dirty plates. Since you were little, always taking care of everyone else. I smiled weakly, wondering if that's all I'd ever be, the family caretaker whose own needs remained perpetually secondary. The thought of my Portland job offer suddenly felt less like abandonment and more like salvation. The Harper family Thanksgiving toast tradition began 12 years ago when Marcus announced his law school acceptance. What started as a spontaneous celebration evolved into an annual ritual, a verbal family newsletter where accomplishments were announced, validated, and immortalized in our collective memory. Shall we begin the toasts? Dad suggested as pumpkin pie slices disappeared from plates. He raised his crystal wine glass, the overhead light catching its facets and sending rainbow reflections dancing across the white tablecloth. Everyone straightened in anticipation, even the children. Everyone except me, who knew what was coming and braced against the familiar pain. This year, I'd like to start with my son, Dad announced, beaming at Marcus, who has not only continued his exceptional work as a corporate attorney, but has been promoted to senior partner at Morrison & Associates, making him the youngest partner in the firm's history. Crystal glasses clinked as everyone except me had something to raise. My water glass remained on the table, my hands folded in my lap. Marcus, you make me prouder than I can express, Dad continued, voice thick with emotion. You're protecting businesses and shaping legal precedent. The Harper legacy continues through you. To Marcus, the table echoed. I mouthed the words without sound. Marcus stood, accepting the praise with practiced humility. Thanks, Dad. It's been a challenging year balancing the partnership responsibilities with Victoria's caseload, but seeing justice served in complex corporate disputes makes it all worthwhile. His speech continued for several minutes, peppered with legal terminology and humble brags about his department's recognition. Victoria gazed adoringly at her husband, occasionally squeezing his arm in support. And I couldn't have done any of it without my incredible wife, Marcus concluded, prompting Dad to raise his glass again. To Victoria, the woman who keeps our family grounded while somehow managing to be a brilliant prosecutor and raising two amazing children. More clinking, more sips. My water remained untouched. Victoria's acceptance speech highlighted her recent conviction of a high-profile white-collar criminal and her department's grant funding. She seamlessly transitioned to praising her children's accomplishments, ensuring Emma and Jake received their portion of family adoration. Emma made first-chair violin in the Youth Symphony, the youngest ever to achieve that position, Victoria announced, prompting Mom to dab at emotional tears. Emma, sitting beside me, straightened with pride. I gave her a gentle side hug that she barely acknowledged, already basking in the collective approval radiating from the adults. And Jake has been selected for the advanced mathematics program, testing 4 grade levels above his age, Victoria continued, clearly following in his father's analytical footsteps. Jake beamed while Dad nodded knowingly, as if exceptional intelligence were exclusively transmitted through the Harper DNA. Mom took over next, glass raised toward Diana. To my beautiful daughter, who continues to astound us with her creativity and courage. This year, Diana not only had her documentary premiere at Sundance, but has signed a 3-picture deal with independent film studios. It's hardly worth mentioning, Diana demurred with false modesty, just telling the stories that need to be told. And telling them brilliantly, Mom insisted. Plus announcing your engagement to Christopher, who unfortunately couldn't join us today because he's in London finalizing distribution deals. Diana's engagement ring caught the light as she adjusted her hair, ensuring everyone noticed the substantial diamond. Chris sends his regrets. He's presenting our latest project to European distributors. The toasts continued around the table. Aunt Patricia's charity fundraising success, Cousin Stephanie's acceptance to graduate school, even my teenage cousin Justin's improved SAT scores earned enthusiastic recognition. And to young Tyler, Dad raised his glass to my second cousin, whom I'd met perhaps twice in my life, for winning his regional debate tournament. Future Supreme Court Justice, perhaps. I shifted uncomfortably as the rotation neared my place setting, my heart pounding with familiar anxiety. Would this be the year they remembered my existence before dessert was cleared? The moment never came. Mom launched into a toast for Mrs. Rodriguez's recovery from surgery, skipping over me completely, as if the space I occupied contained nothing but air. A hot tear threatened to escape, which I disguised by pretending to help Jake with his napkin. Bending down allowed my hair to curtain my face momentarily while I composed myself. "Thank you, Aunt Natalie," Jake whispered, though I hadn't actually done anything helpful. That small acknowledgement from an 8-year-old, the only recognition I'd received all day, nearly broke my carefully constructed emotional dam. The final straw came when Dad raised his glass one last time. And finally, a toast to Whiskers, Stephanie's new kitten, who completed his first vet checkup with flying colors. "Good boy, Whiskers." Laughter rippled around the table. Even the children joined in toasting an absent cat, while the human being sitting between them remained unacknowledged. In that moment, something crystallized within me. The Portland job offer, the apartment listings I'd been secretly browsing, the gradual donation of possessions I no longer wanted to pack. These weren't just idle fantasies, but necessary steps toward survival. I was literally worth less than a kitten to my family. As conversation shifted to Christmas plans, I excused myself to use the restroom. In the hallway mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, eyes dulled by decades of emotional neglect, mouth fixed in a pleasant expression that had become a mask fused to my face. "This is the last time," I whispered to my reflection. "The absolute last time they make you feel invisible." While Mom served coffee alongside the remains of 2 different pies, I quietly opened my purse beneath the tablecloth. My fingers found the folded resignation letter I'd submitted to my supervisor yesterday, a tangible reminder that escape wasn't just a fantasy. Beside it, I placed the small notepad I'd brought specifically for this moment. In tiny, careful handwriting, I composed what would be my final communication with my family for the foreseeable future. "Dear family, after today, I won't be attending future gatherings. This isn't a dramatic exit or plea for attention, just recognition that my presence isn't necessary here. I've accepted a position in Portland and will be moving next month. I wish you all continued success and happiness. Natalie." The note felt simultaneously inadequate and excessive. How do you summarize a lifetime of emotional invisibility in a few sentences? How do you explain to people who've never seen you that you're tired of not being seen? As I wrote, my mind returned to the Portland job interview 3 weeks ago. The nonprofit director had actually looked me in the eyes when I spoke. The team had asked thoughtful questions about my trauma-informed approach. For the first time in my professional life, I felt valued for my specific contributions rather than tolerated as a warm body filling a necessary role. "We need someone with your experience and compassion," the director had said. "Your work with at-risk families is exactly the perspective our organization needs." The salary they offered tripled my current income. The relocation package included temporary housing while I settled in. Most importantly, the job was 1,200 miles from this dining room where I'd spent decades disappearing. I folded the note and slipped it under my barely touched dessert plate. No one would find it until I was long gone. Probably not until tomorrow, when Mom cleared the last dishes. By then, I'd be packed and prepared to submit my apartment notice first thing Monday morning. More coffee, Marcus? Mom asked, deliberately skipping over my empty cup. I checked my watch. Nearly 8 p.m. If I left now, I could claim an early morning shift tomorrow, a believable excuse no one would question or care about. I should probably head out, I announced to no one in particular, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake rumbling beneath my sternum. Early day tomorrow. Oh, you're leaving? Mom asked, seeming genuinely surprised that I'd been there at all. But we haven't even discussed Christmas arrangements. I'm sure whatever you all decide will be fine, I replied, already standing and collecting my sweater from the back of my chair. Marcus glanced up briefly from his phone. Drive safe, Nat. Dad nodded absently, his attention focused on refilling his coffee cup. Thanks for coming. Diana was deep in conversation with Aunt Patricia about her upcoming film premiere, not even pausing to acknowledge my departure. I walked through the dining room with deliberate steps, memorizing details I never expected to see again, the china cabinet with Mom's wedding crystal, the family photos where I always somehow appeared slightly out of focus, the wall markings tracking our childhood heights where Marcus and Diana's final measurements were celebrated with special stars. No one followed me to the foyer. No one called after me with last-minute conversation or forgotten leftovers. I stood alone by the coat rack, shrugging into my jacket with the strange sensation of attending my own funeral, mourning a family relationship while simultaneously feeling liberated by its end. My hand reached for the brass doorknob, cool and solid against my palm. One turn and I'd begin my new life. One step across the threshold and I'd never again subject myself to this annual ritual of systematic erasure. Just as I began to turn the knob, 3 distinct knocks sounded from the other side of the door. I froze, wondering if I'd imagined the sound, a cosmic interruption of my dramatic exit. The knocks repeated, more insistent this time. Confused, I pulled the door open, expecting perhaps a late-arriving relative or a neighbor returning a borrowed dish. Instead, I found myself face-to-face with an elderly man I'd never seen before. His weathered face carried deep lines around kind eyes, and his silver hair was neatly combed despite the evening wind tousling it. He clutched a manila envelope in one hand and what appeared to be a vintage photograph in the other. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt your Thanksgiving, he said, his voice carrying the slight tremor of advanced age, but I've been looking for this address for quite some time. Would this be the Harper residence? It is, I confirmed, suddenly aware of movement behind me as family members, curious about the unexpected visitor, began gathering in the foyer. Who is it, Natalie? Dad called, approaching with uncharacteristic interest in anything involving me. The elderly man's eyes widened slightly upon hearing my name. You're Natalie Harper? Yes, I replied, increasingly confused. A smile transformed his face, erasing years from his appearance. Then my search is finally over. My name is Thomas Whitfield, and I was a dear friend of your grandmother Rose before she died. She entrusted me with something meant specifically for you. He held out the photograph, revealing a black and white image of a young woman with several others gathered around what appeared to be an old-fashioned printing press. Despite the decades separating us, I instantly recognized my grandmother's eyes, the same eyes I saw in my mirror each morning. And this, Thomas continued, extending the manila envelope, is a letter she asked me to deliver to you personally, with very specific timing instructions. By now, my entire family had crowded into the entryway, their collective curiosity momentarily making me visible in a way I hadn't been all day. Perhaps I should come in, Thomas suggested gently, glancing past me at the gathering crowd. In that suspended moment between leaving forever and this unexpected interruption, I felt the universe offering a dramatic plot twist to my carefully planned exit. Whether blessing or curse remained to be seen, but as I stepped aside to welcome this stranger into our home, I sensed my carefully constructed escape plan crumbling beneath the weight of my grandmother's posthumous intervention. Please come in, I said, stepping aside to allow Thomas entry into the foyer. The dramatic exit I'd planned now transformed into something entirely different, a bizarre twist I couldn't have anticipated. "Thank you, my dear," Thomas replied, removing his hat with the courtly manners of a different era. He glanced around at my assembled family, who stared back with undisguised curiosity. "I'm Robert Harper." My father stepped forward, extending his hand. "Rose was my mother." "What's this about a letter?" Thomas shook Dad's hand firmly. "A pleasure to meet Rose's son. She spoke of you often." Mom appeared at Dad's elbow, curiosity overriding her usual reserve with strangers. "Perhaps we should all sit down in the living room. This sounds important." Within minutes, the entire family had relocated to the living room, dessert plates abandoned on the dining table. For once, I wasn't relegated to the edges of the gathering but found myself centered in the impromptu circle, with Thomas sitting directly across from me. "I apologize for interrupting your holiday," Thomas began, his hands carefully cradling the photograph. "I've been searching for Natalie for several months now." "Searching for me?" I echoed, bewildered. "Why?" Thomas smiled gently. "Because your grandmother was very specific about her instructions. This letter and photograph were to be delivered to you personally, not mailed or passed through other family members." "How did you know my grandmother?" Dad interjected, his attorney's scrutiny analyzing Thomas for signs of confusion. "Rose and I were colleagues and dear friends for over 40 years, Thomas replied, "though I suspect most of you didn't know much about that aspect of her life." An uncomfortable silence followed his statement. Grandmother Rose had passed away 4 years ago at the age of 89. I remembered her as a quiet, dignified woman who made exceptional apple pies and kept immaculate gardens. What colleagues could she possibly have had that none of us knew about? "Colleagues?" Marcus questioned, voicing everyone's confusion. "Our grandmother was a homemaker." Thomas chuckled softly. "Is that what you all thought? I suppose Rose would find that both amusing and heartbreaking. Your grandmother was many things, but just a homemaker was certainly not one of them." He held up the photograph, turning it so everyone could see the image more clearly. This was taken in 1967 at the Community Herald offices. Rose was one of the few female journalists covering social justice issues and civil rights demonstrations. The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the room. Mom leaned forward to examine the photograph more carefully. "But Robert never mentioned his mother working as a journalist," Mom said, looking confused. "Because I didn't know," Dad admitted, looking genuinely bewildered. "She was always home when I returned from school. She made dinner every night and attended all my baseball games." "Indeed she did," Thomas nodded. "Rose was remarkably adept at balancing her family responsibilities with her professional life. She worked while you were at school, writing under a pen name to protect her family from potential backlash over some of the controversial topics she covered." "What pen name?" Diana asked, her professional interest piqued. "R.M. Sterling," Thomas replied. Diana gasped audibly. "R.M. Sterling?" "The R.M. Sterling who wrote the groundbreaking exposé series on educational inequality. Those articles are literally taught in journalism school as pioneering examples of investigative reporting." Thomas smiled with evident pride. "The very same. Your grandmother was an exceptional writer and a fearless reporter. She continued writing well into her 70s, though her later work focused more on local community issues and human interest stories." I sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this new information with the grandmother I thought I'd known. How could such a significant aspect of her life have remained hidden from her entire family? But why didn't she ever tell us? I finally asked. Thomas's expression softened as he turned to face me directly. "That, Natalie, is part of what she explains in her letter. But I can tell you this much. Your grandmother saw herself in you from the time you were very young." "In me?" I repeated, incredulous. "Not in Diana, the actual journalist?" "In you," Thomas confirmed. "Rose recognized something in your spirit that reminded her of herself, a quiet strength that often goes unnoticed by others." From the corner of my eye, I saw my family exchanging confused glances. The idea that unremarkable Natalie might share special qualities with a woman who'd apparently led a secret life of significance seemed incomprehensible to them. Rose began planning this bequest about 5 years ago, shortly before her health declined. Thomas continued. She was very particular about the timing, insisting I find you independently rather than going through other family members. Why the secrecy? Dad pressed, clearly troubled by these revelations about his mother. Thomas sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 80-plus years. Rose had her reasons, which I believe she explains in her letter. It wasn't my place to question them. I promised my dear friend I would follow her instructions precisely, and that's what I've spent the last several months trying to do. How did you find me? I asked. With considerable difficulty, Thomas admitted with a small smile. I knew you worked in social services, but had only a general location. I visited 23 agencies before finding someone who recognized your name. Even then, I wasn't sure if you'd be here today. It's fortunate you caught me, I said quietly, thinking of how close I'd come to walking out that door forever just moments before his arrival. I was actually just leaving. Then my timing was indeed providential, Thomas replied. Rose would say the universe conspires to make important connections happen when they're meant to. He leaned forward, extending the manila envelope toward me. This belongs to you now, Natalie. What you choose to share with your family is entirely your decision. That was another of Rose's specific instructions. I accepted the envelope with trembling fingers, feeling its substantial weight. Whatever secrets my grandmother had kept, whatever message she'd intended for me alone, now rested in my hands. There's more to discuss, Thomas added, including some practical matters concerning your grandmother's foundation. But perhaps you'd like to read the letter first. Foundation. Dad repeated, looking increasingly bewildered. What foundation? Thomas glanced at me, clearly leaving the choice to share in my hands. The power of this moment, suddenly becoming the family member with exclusive information, the center of attention after a lifetime on the periphery, was both intoxicating and terrifying. I think, I said slowly, finding confidence in my voice, we should all hear what Grandmother Rose has to say. With careful movements, I broke the seal on the envelope and removed several handwritten pages. My grandmother's elegant script flowed across the paper, beginning with words that immediately brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Natalie, the granddaughter who carries my spirit without ever knowing it. The living room fell into profound silence as I unfolded my grandmother's letter. Even the children sensed the gravity of the moment, their usual fidgeting stilled by the unusual tension. Would you like to read it privately first? Mom asked, surprising me with her unexpected sensitivity. I considered the option briefly before shaking my head. No, I think Grandmother wanted her words to be heard by everyone eventually. We might as well do it now. With a deep breath, I began reading aloud. My dearest Natalie, the granddaughter who carries my spirit without ever knowing it. If you're reading this letter, then my faithful friend Thomas has fulfilled his promise to find you. I've chosen this method of communication because some truths can only be properly conveyed after we've left this world, when the recipient is ready to hear them. First, I must apologize for the secrecy that defined much of my life. By the time you were old enough to understand my choices, I had lived so long in the shadows that stepping into the light seemed impossible. Old habits, as they say, die hard, often outliving the people who form them. You've grown into the woman I always knew you would become, compassionate, resilient, and possessing the quiet strength that often goes unrecognized in a world that rewards louder voices. I've watched you from the sidelines, noting how you navigate family gatherings with grace despite being perpetually overlooked. I recognize the pattern because I lived it myself, though in a different era and for different reasons. While your father believes I was simply a homemaker and mother, my life contained multitudes he never glimpsed. The photograph Thomas has shown you offers just a glimpse of my professional identity as journalist R.M. Sterling. What even that doesn't reveal is the network of social support initiatives I built over decades, operating quietly alongside my more public writing career. The Sterling Foundation began in 1974 as a modest program supporting at-risk families. Over the years, It expanded to include counseling services, educational support, and advocacy programs, all causes I believed could transform lives from the inside out, much as you do in your work with troubled families. I paused, looking up to find my family's expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Dad appeared particularly stunned, learning about a mother he clearly hadn't fully known. "Go on," Thomas encouraged gently. "The best is yet to come." I returned to the letter. "What gives me the greatest joy, Natalie, is seeing how you've independently chosen a path so aligned with my own deepest values. Without knowing about my foundation's work, you've dedicated yourself to helping the very families we aim to support, those overlooked and underestimated by systems designed for more conventional success stories. Your work hasn't gone unnoticed, at least not by me. I've followed your career through professional channels, reading your published articles on trauma-informed family intervention and attending conferences where you've presented, sitting anonymously in the back row, just another grandmother figure no one would connect to the poised young woman at the podium. I've seen you shine in those professional settings, Natalie. I've witnessed the respect your colleagues have for your insights. I've observed the transformation in troubled families who found in you the advocate they desperately needed. While your family may have failed to recognize your unique gifts, please know that others, myself included, have seen and valued them profoundly." I swallowed hard, fighting the emotion threatening to choke my voice. Across the room, Mom had tears streaming down her cheeks while Dad stared at the floor, his expression unreadable. Now to practical matters. Upon my death, the bulk of my estate was placed in trust for the Sterling Foundation, with specific instructions regarding succession planning. As the Foundation's founder, I've exercised my prerogative to name you, Natalie Harper, as my chosen successor to serve as executive director, should you wish to accept this role. Gasps echoed around the room. Marcus leaned forward, his expression suddenly intense with interest. Diana's mouth fell open in undisguised shock. The Foundation's current assets total approximately $8 million, with annual grant distributions of nearly $750,000 supporting family service initiatives nationwide. The position includes a director's. The Foundation's current assets total approximately $8 million, with annual grant distributions of nearly $750,000 supporting family service initiatives nationwide. The position includes a director's salary of $180,000 annually, plus benefits and housing allowance. I've structured this bequest specifically for you because I believe you're the only family member who truly understands the mission. Your siblings have found their own paths to success, but you, my dear granddaughter, have chosen service over status, just as I did decades ago. If you accept this position, you'll work with our Portland office as the primary headquarters, though the Foundation maintains satellite locations in 12 cities. Yes, Portland, I knew about your job offer there, just as I've known about many aspects of your life that others have overlooked. The room erupted in stunned silence. My hands trembled as I processed the magnitude of what I'd just read aloud. $8 million. Portland. A foundation dedicated to exactly the work I'd been doing in obscurity for over a decade. "This can't be real," Marcus said, his voice tight with disbelief. "There's no way Mom had $8 million. Thomas reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick legal folder. "I have all the documentation here, including the Foundation's tax filings for the past 15 years. Rose was quite successful in her investments, particularly in early technology stocks. She lived modestly but accumulated wealth specifically for this purpose." "Why didn't she tell us?" Dad asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "All these years, I thought I knew my mother." "She explains that too," I said, my voice steadier now as I continued reading. "Robert, my beloved son, I kept my professional life separate because I feared it might overshadow your own achievements. In the 1960s and 70s, having a mother who publicly challenged social norms could have damaged your legal career. I chose to protect your path rather than claim credit for mine. Marcus and Diana, your grandmother is proud of your successes, but she also recognizes that your talents lie in different areas. The foundation requires someone with specific experience in family systems and trauma intervention, skills that Natalie has developed through years of dedicated service. To my entire family, I hope you'll understand that this decision isn't about favoritism, but about matching the right person with the right purpose. Natalie has been invisible to you, but she's been clearly visible to those whose lives she's touched professionally. I looked up to find my family staring at me with expressions I'd never seen before: surprise, reassessment, and something that might have been respect. "There's more," I said, returning to the letter. "Natalie, if you accept this role, you'll have the resources to expand programs you've only dreamed of implementing. The Foundation's board has been eagerly awaiting your decision. Yes, they already know about you and have reviewed your professional background extensively. However, I want you to know that this offer comes with no obligation to maintain relationships that have caused you pain. The Foundation's work can be your fresh start, your opportunity to build the life and career you deserve, surrounded by people who value your contributions. I've enclosed information about the Portland headquarters, including keys to the downtown office and the Foundation-owned apartment that comes with the position. Everything is ready for your transition, whenever you're prepared to make it. Most importantly, know that you are seen, valued, and loved, not for what you might become, but for who you already are. Your compassion, your dedication, and your quiet strength are exactly what this world needs more of. With all my love and faith in your bright future. Grandmother Rose, R.M. Sterling." The silence that followed was unlike any I'd ever experienced in this house. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention not because of what I lacked, but because of what I possessed. Thomas cleared his throat gently. "There are some legal documents to review, but Rose insisted I emphasize that this decision is entirely yours, Natalie. The Foundation will continue operating under interim management as long as necessary." "I need to process this," I said, carefully folding the letter. "It's a lot to take in." "Of course," Thomas replied, "though I should mention that Rose anticipated you might feel overwhelmed. She instructed me to tell you that the Portland job offer you received 3 weeks ago? The nonprofit director is actually on our Foundation's advisory board. He reached out to them about a promising candidate, you, and they encouraged him to make the offer, hoping it might help facilitate your eventual transition to Portland." My mouth fell open. "She orchestrated that too?" "Your grandmother was remarkably thorough in her planning," Thomas said with a smile. "She wanted to ensure you had multiple paths to the life you deserved." Dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "Natalie, I owe you an apology. We all do. I had no idea that Mom saw, that she understood. That I actually contributed something worthwhile." I finished, not harshly, but with clear recognition of the pattern. "We've been blind," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "All these years, we've been celebrating achievements we understood while completely missing the important work you've been doing." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "The Foundation, it's legitimate? The money is real." "Completely legitimate," Thomas confirmed. "Rose was quite wealthy, though she chose to live simply. She donated generously to causes she believed in, but saved the bulk of her estate for this specific purpose." Diana, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "Natalie, I had no idea about any of this. About grandmother's work, about your professional recognition, about any of it." "Most people don't," I replied. "Social work isn't exactly red carpet material." "But it should be," Diana said, surprising me with her earnestness. "The work you've described, helping families and children, that's more important than any film I've ever made." I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of condescension or performative empathy, but found only genuine recognition. "So, what will you do?" Mom asked. "Will you accept the position?" I looked around the room at my family, the same people who had toasted a kitten while ignoring my existence just hours earlier. Their sudden attention felt surreal, like waking up in an alternate reality where I mattered. "I need to think about it," I said honestly. "This changes everything I thought I knew about my future." "The Portland apartment," Thomas added, "is available whenever you'd like to see it." Rose made sure it was fully furnished and move-in ready. I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. The job I'd already been offered in Portland suddenly seemed like a stepping stone to something far more significant. The escape plan I'd been crafting transformed into a triumphant new beginning. "There's one more thing," Thomas said, reaching into his briefcase again. "Rose asked me to give you this only after you'd read the letter." He handed me a small jewelry box. Inside was a simple gold locket containing a tiny photograph of my grandmother as a young woman, along with an even smaller photo of me at my college graduation, the ceremony none of my family had attended because it conflicted with Marcus's law school graduation party. "She carried this for years," Thomas explained. "She wanted you to have it as a reminder that someone always saw your worth, even when you couldn't see it yourself." I clasped the locket around my neck, feeling its weight settle against my chest like a protective talisman. "I should go," I said, standing up slowly. "I have a lot to think about." This time, when I moved toward the door, the entire family followed. But instead of the distracted, obligatory farewells I'd grown accustomed to, I found myself surrounded by people who suddenly seemed to see me clearly for the first time. "We'd like to learn more about your work," Dad said, his words carrying weight they'd never held before. "About the families you help and what the foundation does." "We have a lot of catching up to do," Mom added, pulling me into a hug that felt different from any embrace we'd shared before, more substantial, more genuine. Marcus stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Natalie, I want to apologize for all the times I talked over you or dismissed what you were saying. I realize now that I was probably missing important insights." "We all were," Diana added. "I'd love to hear about your work sometime. Maybe I could even document some of the Foundation's programs if you think that would be helpful." I nodded, not quite ready to forgive years of neglect, but appreciating the effort behind their words. Thomas walked me to my car, carrying the folder of Foundation documents. "Your grandmother would be so proud," he said. "She always believed this moment would come, when your family would finally see what she saw in you all along." "Thank you for keeping your promise to her," I replied, "and for giving me this gift." "The gift was always yours, Natalie. I was just the messenger." As I drove home through the quiet Thanksgiving evening, I thought about the note I'd left under my dessert plate, the farewell message that would now seem melodramatic when my parents discovered it tomorrow. I thought about the Portland apartment waiting for me, the Foundation staff eager to meet their new director, and the $8 million in resources I could use to help families like the ones I'd been working with for years. Most of all, I thought about my grandmother Rose, who had seen me clearly when I couldn't even see myself, who had built a legacy not just of money and programs, but of recognition for the kind of quiet strength that often goes unnoticed in families obsessed with louder achievements. The invisible daughter was invisible no more. 2 weeks later, I stood in the Portland Foundation office, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The staff had welcomed me with enthusiasm that felt completely foreign after years of professional underappreciation. My first board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday, and I'd already reviewed dozens of grant applications from programs that mirrored my own deepest convictions about helping families heal. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Marcus wants to volunteer his legal services to the Foundation. Diana is planning a documentary about grandmother's journalism. We're all finally starting to understand what we missed. Thank you for your patience with us." I smiled, tucking the phone back into my pocket. Forgiveness would come gradually, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen by my family. More importantly, I felt seen by myself, not as the overlooked middle child, but as the woman my grandmother had always known I could become. The Sterling Foundation's mission statement hung framed on my office wall, supporting families through quiet strength and compassionate intervention. Below it, I'd added a small placard with my grandmother's words, "True worth is often found in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to step into the light." My moment had finally arrived.